Welcome to Earworm, episode 6. Today we're talking about pedal boards. We have a very special guest. This will be our first interview for the show, Mr. Greg Walton. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm flattered to be here today.
Man, I can think of nobody else. So for those of you who don't know, Greg is the owner of XTS, which is the preeminent pedal board maker, and they also design and build incredible pedals too. So they are honestly the lifeblood for the majority of session musicians in Nashville. Anytime I'm dreaming up something crazy, I always call Greg and like, hey, can we do this? Or is this kind of weird? You know, and they kind of go, Bryan, no. And then let us show you how to do it.
Right on.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, Greg. We really appreciate you taking the time out. Everybody's busy. It's a crazy world right now. So I guess the first question is, like, give us your origin story, man. Like, I know you're from Texas, but tell us about tinkering and, you know, growing up in music.
Yeah, I mean, it all started as a kid with a love for music, a love for guitar. I had an uncle that was a guitar player, had an old, like a 60s Strat that he, for some reason, traded in for an Ovation guitar at some point. But I remember seeing that Strat around my grandmother's house forever. And it just, that Strat, that image was burned in my brain. And then, I mean, years later, the music I learned about was like Clapton with like the Slow Hand record and so forth was a big deal. The Allman Brothers was a big deal. Steve Miller. I mean, I think if I look back at what pushed me to play guitar, it was that riff on "Keep on Rockin' Me, Baby." You know, that riff for some reason did something permanently to the brain. Mm-hmm. So going through and loving music forever, and I remember as a kid having my dad cut out like plywood Stratocasters and stuff. So it was always, for whatever reason, it was always a Stratocaster. But I was late to the party, like playing. I didn't get into really playing until I was 19. Didn't start really playing live until I was in my mid to latter 20s. And in Houston, there was plenty of places to play. I was in the southeastern side of Houston, so Clear Lake was a big deal, and there was a lot of bars and so forth like that, so you could stay busy. I mean, in Nashville, even to play on Broadway, the level of player you have to be is otherworldly, you know.
Yeah, it's everybody that plays in Nashville. They didn't necessarily come here to play on Broadway. These were people that were playing session studios and playing with big artists, and everybody moved here. Songwriters, really great players. So it's insane to go to Broadway, and just the level of musicianship is just out of control.
It's like being in the 1 O'Clock Jazz Band at North Texas. You don't go there to learn how to play guitar. You go there to just master it and craft what you are as a player and so forth.
You go there to let horn players know that you can play guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I learned how to put together pedal boards. I learned how to put together rack rigs. I have a really good friend that kind of brought me into all of that. His name is John Ziegler. He was, he showed me what great gear was. He showed me the very first Tyler guitar that I ever played, a James Tyler guitar. It was his Mike Landau signature Vomit Studio Elite thing. And that night that I remember playing that guitar, we had several vintage guitars, vintage Tellys and Strats in, and that guitar, for some reason, just took the cake that night. But I learned a lot of gear through him, things about gear through him, and then started helping people like my friend Kenny Cordray, that was a great player around Houston, would help him put his pedal boards together. My friend Kirk McKim, that played with Pat Travers for a long time, and now he's out with Billy Bob Thornton and his band.
All right.
So he stayed pretty active. So developed a number of friends that I would help them with their gear, kept my own gear up. And then when I started tinkering on pedals, again, a friend of mine taught me, my friend Luther taught me how to not be afraid of a soldering iron. Learning to craft, I was trying to help guys get their sounds. They would come to me, this is what I'm envisioning this board sounding like, but this pedal sounds weak and this one is not getting it. And at the time, you didn't have all of the boutique builders that you do now.
Can I interrupt? I want
Sure.
to ask a question about that. So with John's sort of influence on you and sort of you knowing gear, because that's glossing over a huge thing. I mean, that education of like understanding the difference between a Plexi and a Vox, or let alone a Space Echo or a Rotosound Fuzz.
Yep.
I mean, tell us a little bit about that, because that's interesting to me. Like, if I came to you back in the day and I was like, this isn't working for me, just as those guys were.
Right.
How did you know what to fix or what to sculpt?
That's interesting, because one of the things that I also have to give John a lot of credit for is ear calibration. He had a couple of bands that he played in. They had a really nice rehearsal studio. He had monies to buy really nice gear, so he had a 68 Plexi super bass amplifier. I learned what a 68 super bass Plexi Marshall sounds like on 9,
right?
And then on 7, and then putting a tube screamer through it. What does that sound like? How does the feel change? Mm-hmm. Even though I'm not anywhere close to the player that John is, or a lot of guys are, I could get the feel of things and how it excited the ear and so forth.
I think that's a very cool education, learning those things and seeing how your ear responds to it and how you're hearing it, and the little nuances just between volumes is just that time that you spend with those amplifiers is just so invaluable, because it teaches you not only about that amplifier but about the way that you hear that amplifier. So I think that's really cool.
And going from, in an evening where we'd get these big like tone parties together where there would be 8 or 10 of us, and we'd bring out an old 60s, like a 60, an early 60s Vox AC30, and then we would have a Tweed Deluxe, and then we would have Deluxe reverbs and Princeton reverbs and Plexi Marshalls.
Party?
Exactly.
That sounds fun.
It is.
We should make this a new thing.
Like have a tone party.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
And being able to go in there and hear all of that stuff and feel it, your ears start to get calibrated. So when you'd go out and friends would say, yeah, this isn't really what I'm after, this seems weak or stuff, and I could go to pedals and say, yeah, that does kind of sound weak. And at the time, Robert Keeley was in Oklahoma, and he was doing a bunch of pedal mods. I mean, I had him modding Ibanez compressors, tube screamers, blues drivers. He was doing a lot of modifications. Once his compressor took off and what seemed he got busier with his own production of a product, then there was not all the availability to get modded pedals out at that point in time. And I'm not even really sure what year that was. It was somewhere in the 90s, that happened.
Was Keeley, just to hit on that a little bit, was Keeley doing, when you were calling him and saying, hey, look, I need these pedals modded, was he even considering, like, Keeley as we know him to be now as a company making those pedals? Because those Keeley compressors was such a big part of late 90s and all the way through the 2000, almost to 2011, that compressor was like on everybody's board. Like you had to have a Keeley compressor and a tube screamer and a little bit of slapback delay and a telly if you wanted to play in Nashville. It was like
Yeah. I think that before there was that compressor, there was a lot of modifications going on. But yeah, when that compressor took off, I guess the people that were modding were now populating circuit boards and doing things for the compressor. I don't know that for a fact, but it seemed like the production had to shift into the pedal, the product, versus all of the modifications. So what that forced me to do was, how do I get the modifications done? At that point, R.G. Keene was someone that had a website and shared information, and Brian Wampler had published like a booklet, a PDF booklet, for a blues driver. Here's the Brent Mason mod. Here's this mod. Here's that mod. And then I would use my ears to go, okay, well, I know this is going to, and I did it, like now I can ask Barry, who is the engineer at Xact Tone Solutions, I can ask him, hey, what's going to happen if I change this cap value? Because I'm just doing it from rote. I mean, I'm self-taught. And he can tell me exactly why it's doing what but I would just change values until it sounded right to me.
Right.
And typically that worked. Actually doing the pedal mods and stuff is for Kenny Cordray and doing boards for him got me introduced to Dave Seabury, Austin School of Music, great player. Mm-hmm. They're in Austin, huge, very influential. I think you worked at the Austin School of Music for a while, right?
I did. I taught some guitar there.
Meeting Dave and then getting into the Austin crowd, another person that I learned a ton about rig-wise and so forth is Dave Friedman at Rack Systems. I'd go to L.A. to visit my friend John, and fortunately for me, I could go. I worked in L.A. doing environmental stuff. So the other half of my life is being an environmental consultant where I help people comply with air law. And but I'd go to L.A. to do one of my environmental gigs, and then I'd stay a week out there and got to know Dave Friedman. And, Dave would tell me, why don't you try doing a few pedals of your own and so forth. And he kind of gave me some ideas. I picked that up, and I think Dave Seabury still has the very first pedal I ever did.
Wow. And
it's still on one of his boards. And I learned really quickly, you don't give away you don't sell or give away the first production pedal of anything that you do. Getting into kind of doing those pedals led me into meeting a bunch of the Austin-based people, Stephen Bruton, Van Wilkes, I did pedals for both of those guys. And then it kind of morphed into the mid-2000s. There was a couple of us that created a business there called LA Sound Design. I was in Houston and decided that I think I wanted to do this. And again, I always wanted to do a business where racks and pedal boards and putting gear together for not only local guys, but for touring guys and so forth was, became kind of, something I really wanted to do. So LA Sound Design was one of those. And, Dave Friedman was really busy. There was, I think the Bradshaw, was doing product lines and so forth. So there was a kind of a void that we could fill. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm just thinking back on it. I mean, like, you kind of were in the epicenter or the sweet spot of just sort of like, because the names that you're mentioning, besides like,
I was about to say the professional circle there is
right
is uncanny.
is amazing, but also like you guys were sort of the real, I guess, at the cutting that first set of waves of the boutique pedal and the design and everything else, because everything else, if you wanted a pedal, you bought a Boss or you bought a Ross or you did a, you know what I mean? Like there were certain brands that were large, big box retailers, and this was eschewing all that. So you had Keeley, and then you have Wampler, and then you're in the mix of all this stuff, and then you've got, Dave Friedman, and then you have all the players that you're sort of getting not only in LA, but also back home, in Austin.
Right.
And everybody's kind of paying attention and trying to figure out what that next thing that it is going to be.
Right. And just having those relationships, like being able to know Dave Friedman that I got to know through my friend John, to get to know Scott Henderson, that an amazing player, just
is that the Tribal Tech?
Tribal Tech,
yeah, great.
Just an out of this world player.
Yep.
Being able to provide him with stuff up front, developing those relationships, and then developing the relationships with people in Austin, and it just kind of mushroomed from there. So it started really small, but it took on a lot of heat. Knowing how busy I was with the environmental company in Houston, the trek going back and forth, it was clear to me in about 6 or 8 months that was not a long-term solution. I kind of bowed out of that. But after
at that point, how did you conceptualize what you were going to build? Was it you were getting input from artists or peers, and you were making individual pedals and be like, this is the one that I like? Or was it coming from you going, hey, this is what I'm looking for in sound? How would those influences?
A lot of it would come from different players. Like, one of the products that we did for a long time we really don't do it anymore, was the Pegasus Boost, which was basically a modified Alembic Stratoblaster, which was what Lowell George had in his Strats, and then became the input on the double amp. The FET, I believe, was an Alembic Stratoblaster circuit, or a variation of. So, and then Dave Phillips came to us with an idea about, I really like this boost that became the Tejas Boost, which was like an old Color Sound power booster and so forth. So some of those came along. Guys would come to me, I really need a high-end Marshall, like a modified Marshall sound, something like Egnator or whatever, what they were doing with the Marshall circuit. And out of that sprung the Atomic Overdrive. Moving to Nashville, you had to do, some kind of ODR circuit. Right. So that's the Imperial Overdrive is our version of that. But we would always, Xact Tone Solutions was that in all of those products that were, again, the ODR always seemed to have a bit of bass. Some of them had more than others, but if anybody was complaining, they would be complaining about it maybe being a little too compressed, right, a little too bassy. And there's a toggle switch on that pedal to get rid of that. And then once we did the circuit and we got rid of a lot of that stuff, they go, I'd like a little bit of it back. And so they invented toggle switches for things like that. So that pedal, and then we did the preamp pedal that was like the Atomic and the Precision and the Pegasus Boost all in one pedal. So we did some of that. And then on the backside of that, by this time, we had in 2011 is when Xact Tone Solutions opened in Nashville in the greater Berry Hill area. And that all came about was when I was doing the Tejas Boost, I needed some help, like getting a printed circuit board done and so forth. And my friend Dave Phillips at LA Sound Design said, well, why don't you contact Bob O'Neill in Nashville? And he helped me there because he went to Dave Phillips went to Belmont.
Okay.
And so he knew Nashville and some of the people that did gear work, and Bob helped people with gear during that time period that Dave was here. And then when I went and met with Bob, Barry O'Neill, who is now the engineer at XTS and helped open the doors and start the company and has been huge for what we can do as a company. Barry is essential to all of that. Barry was helping me with the Tejas Boost, and then he helped me with the Atomic Overdrive. And then he and his father were doing Kingdom Amplifiers, which was a custom amplifier company. And then for some reason, that kind of went to the side. And in January, end of 2010, we kind of started talking about, should we try to do this rig building thing, in Nashville, because Dave Wilkerson, that had been at Techstar here for a long time, was doing a lot of the big rack rigs and stuff here, and there wasn't that anymore. As far as some of the engineering things we can do that Barry's able to do, finally, we worked out how we were going to do it. We found a place. We opened the doors in January. There was a lot of crickets for the first couple of years, but it seemed like pretty soon we had, and it started with like Guthrie Trapp one day calling, hey, I got these Boss pedals that have an issue. Can I come in and get you guys to fix them? And we'd do some pedal repairs. And then there was Ryan Warner was one of the first clients in, Jed Hughes.
All great players.
Amazing players.
Yeah.
And so we started to word of mouth. I mean, in Nashville, everything seems to get done by word of mouth until somebody says, hey, you need to go see these guys. And that still happens today. We've been here for almost completed a 16th year, and we still have people come in, we just thought you did pedals. We didn't know you did rigs. But it's always word of mouth that kind of, and now, Instagram, and we have a lot of people out there, Tom Bukovac's, his YouTube channel has brought a lot of people to us and so forth. Mm-hmm. So,
who came to you and said the craziest thing, and you were like, I don't know, okay, we'll figure it out.
Oh man, this is gonna be good.
I don't know for me personally. Now, we've done some rig stuff that, a few years ago, this was pretty early on, and they're still using the racks today. This had to be 8, 9, 10 years ago. Carrie Underwood, we knew Sean Tubbs, or we know Sean Tubbs, and Sean Tubbs got us a shot at doing some rigs for them. They were going to be in the round, and they couldn't be tethered. The players couldn't be tethered to 2 rigs. So, and they wanted to go to fractals, to where everything was. It ended up being a 40-space rack, 2 20-space racks on the same cabinet, which if that would have gone off the back of the truck the wrong way, show wouldn't have happened,
Right.
And so we did smaller rigs for them that could have flown and that they could use for travel and so forth. But that rig, during rehearsals, they had the foot controllers for the fractals and stuff for doing the sound changes and so forth. And there was a computer taking all of that data and cataloging it, and so that when they were playing live, computer was making all the changes to the rig. So all of the rehearsal stuff where they were doing the changes in real time and working the treadles in real time.
Right.
That was all being recorded and then played back in the
then
live
automated.
setting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, to where all the player had to do was have his wireless pack and his instrument.
That's it.
And play his parts, and then they had done the work in pre-production to get everything down.
And they just have a set list time-coded, right? And
yeah.
That's incredible. I remember reading about the Edge, because he had done that several years ago, where he was like, I want to automate everything. Everything's my tech's responsibility, and all I have to do is put on my guitar and go play. And it's like, that's so cool. It's like,
it's amazing.
So that's what they're doing.
That's what they did for that tour. And again, they couldn't be tethered because of the particulars of the show and so forth, the production of the show.
Right.
And you, as we were talking before we started, the Bon Iver rig for Justin was kind of another one that came in really closely behind that. The pedal board on that was all RJM stuff that we did, and we have a good relationship with those guys. And that and the gig rig stuff are killer for automating things and so forth. Carrie Underwood was probably one of the more unique rigs that we've done. Another thing is Russ Paul,
right,
coming to us, and we created some stuff where he could use a synth.
Yeah.
With his steel guitar,
Yeah.
and do some of the things that he was doing.
So Russ is got a thing with us with Modern Music Masters, but when we did the Paul Franklin pedal steel camp in 2020, he did his whole thing where he came out and he did the whole vocoder, almost the synth.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we've done a few things like that where a guy comes to us and again. The heavy lifting is Barry does all of the heavy lifting with how do we technically make all this stuff happen. One of the things I'll say too is that if something isn't going to work or it's not going to be cost effective to do, even some of us doing repairs on pedals and stuff, if it's not going to make financial sense, Barry's really good about saying, hey, we're X amount an hour, and this may take 4 hours to do it. You can buy a new one for, half of that. Mm-hmm. We're really good about doing that and being practical with the guys that are making a living doing it, because it's hard enough to make a living in the music business now.
Sure.
And being able to, being frugal for our clientele as well is a plus. So.
I think that's extraordinarily awesome. I think sounds like it's a very collaborative process when you're dealing with any artist.
Absolutely.
And this is kind of a question for both of you is, you've obviously worked together on 4 pedal boards at this point?
Yeah.
Could you describe the collaboration process there?
Yeah, I basically, at least the way it works for me, is I'll kind of get an idea of kind of what I'm looking for, and then I go in and go visit with Greg and Barry, and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Is this possible? And then they usually just kind of laugh at me and then go, yeah, we'll do it. Or, or like, no, dude. So sometimes I've come in with some really stupid ideas, but
I believe that.
yeah. So, but most of the time it's like that, or I'll measure out, like, okay, I've got these pedals. Will it fit on what form factor, or we're going to cut you a new one. And then I think about the signal flow, and then we sit around and bat around like, okay, if we put your compressor here, is that going to be before the effects loop? Yes. Do you want it? What do you want in your effects loop in the order? It gets really technical really fast.
Yeah, and Barry and Eric, I mostly have been on the business end of things most of the time because I've been back and forth between Houston. So Barry and Eric are in the office every day of the week. I'm not, and and they do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, though, there's enough love for the instrument and love for music between all of us that at first glance, it may not look like it's possible to be done, or maybe not be cost effective or whatever. I think we've actually told people that we can't do that, and then a few weeks later going, oh yeah, we found this product that's going to allow that to happen.
Right, and that's happened to me before too. And I have to mention Eric because he's the guy that a lot of times. Typically, what it is on a normal pedal design, I'll come in, I'll have a whole box full of pedals, and then I'll say, here's what we want to do, and then Barry and Eric go do their magic spells and quotients and everything else like that, and then Greg and I just sit around and shoot the shit for like 2.5 hours talking about great gigs and great albums and music and all the really fun stuff.
So how does one prepare for something like that? Let's say an artist is like, I need to get this done. How does that process start? Like, what's the kickoff?
The kickoff is a consultation. So guys will come in and say they'll either bring in all of their toys, or we've had guys we've done consultations over the phone where a guy sends us 3 or 4 audio clips, and maybe it's a Pink Floyd song, or maybe it's a Hendrix tune or whatever. I want to make these sounds. You pick the pedals, you do all of that. So we've gotten from where we do everything, and that's picking pedals based on the sounds that we heard and so forth. And that's a collaborative effort between all of us. Hey, what do you think will do this best and so forth? And, Eric's been a professional tech for years as well on the road with people and so forth. So even live, when we're looking at how is this going to work for the techs, how is this going to work for the production manager and stuff, for guys that are doing utility stuff, you may be working with a number of different players in front of house. You may be dealing with anyway. There's more complexity with that. And then,
I'm sure. I was like, even the marketing department from Warner might get involved and say, no, you can't have that on stage. For the show.
Yeah, I mean we've had,
right.
We've had to do interesting things to get certain rigs done and buy off. And so forth from the production, getting, okay, who's going to pay for this, and we're really good about. So guy comes in, let's just say he plays in the church on Sunday in Jackson, Mississippi, and he may come in and drive in and tell us what he's looking to do, and then we'll do that rig just like we would do the rig for Tom Bukovac or Derek Wells or Rob McNally, as far as the attention to detail, what the ins and outs need to be, what's going to give him the tools that he needs to be as successful as he can be. Can't ever get around this. I keep looking for the magic talent pedal for myself, and haven't found it yet. But there's a lot of love for guitar in the shop. I will say this. Eric's the one that really plays. You know, for me, sitting on the couch a lot of days doing work, it's actually I'll go, you know, I probably should be paying a cover charge for this, you know. And he's such a great player, and that goes into, you know, the fact that he can do so much playing wise is another thing that gives us an advantage of when we're doing videos and stuff like that, but also getting a feel for, is it going to work? Is it not going to work?
Yeah. What do you think's changed? Like, you know, you've been doing this a long time now, and pedals come and go.
Right.
And it seems like there's an endless avalanche of pedals, right?
True.
The churn factor is exquisitely high.
Right.
So when you come out with a new pedal, what typically do you have to set your sights on and go, this is a realistic expectation of how long this pedal will probably be in the guitar player public eye?
Yeah, I mean,
is there one, or what are the challenges?
The challenges are your first run of pedals. Let's just say a manufacturer that's doing, you know, you've got Wampler that's doing a lot of stuff. Robert Keeley has released, a number of things that are really, really good. I mean, the Halo delay that Keeley introduced is a really killer delay. But even with that, as killer as a product as it is, and it's one of my favorite delays ever, because it, like a PCM 42, 2290, some of the old rack gear, it washed like a reverb versus really saying I'm a delay. It had a certain ambience to it that was
kind of get smeared as the repeats started to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Halo is beautiful in doing that. But, you know, you and I had talked a couple of weeks ago about pedals and so forth. It's, you know, it's probably a 6 to 8 month run. Like the first few batches of pedals is probably where you're going to sell 80-90% of what you do. We have been horrible at coming up with a pedal design, and then it hits our Instagram page and then it's for sale. You know, we haven't ever done the marketing the way that we wanted to do. And we have several things in the queue that have been 7 or 8 years that we should have released them for whatever reason, and that's on me. It just hasn't happened. The pandemic happened, and that kept a few things from getting out. But I have to follow my sword, saying that some of that stuff is just on me. We've done things very behind the scenes, very slowly. They got into the hands of players like Scott and so forth. We've never really done huge production runs other than a few. But I think for the challenging thing for any pedal manufacturer, especially if you're doing it on a small scale, is if you come up with an idea, and you know, probably the first few runs, the first 6 months, and then the public, the guitar buying public, pedal buying public is probably going to be on to the next thing, whatever that is. Especially with overdrives, it's flavor of the month.
And it's easy to get lost too in the sheer amount that there are. I mean, we went to a store in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, and it's an entire pedal store. There's a few guitars, a few amps, but it's all pedals. And I could see anybody going in there, you have just this fatigue of choice, right? There's just so much to choose from and so many to play. And after a while, if you're just testing overdrives for a day, you're like, these all sound the same. Even if they don't, you just, the ear fatigue, the choice fatigue, there's just a lot. There's just so many out there. It's hard to decide, you know?
Right.
I think when you really get into pedals, it's such an easier metric, I think, in a way of measurement of tone than like amps, because the amps have too many moving. There's too much entropy, like with tubes and with transformers and everything else, and everything that's been condensed into a pedal that can just fit in your back pocket, so to speak. It's a little bit more. It's a clearer way to evaluate kind of what you're hearing than it is if you're just trying to, like, if you had 30 plexis that would be difficult because they would sound radically different.
Yeah.
Like you can't quite split hairs. It's the same with vintage microphones or vintage guitars, like especially for acoustic guitars, pre-war Martins and so on and so forth. I mean, not everyone is a 10 out of 10.
Right?
No.
Right?
No.
I mean, I played a 59 Paul that I was like, meh, my Murphy Lab from 2018 is better sounding than this, and through no fault of its own. But it's just like that's just the way it got made that day, brother.
Yeah, they don't make them like they used to.
Right.
I mean, again, the Martin. That's a really great example. Is every guitar that they made pre-war, especially, every guitar sounded different.
I mean, I guess you run into that with pedals because you only buy a limited stock of components.
Okay.
And your values, and
right?
And you've probably wrestled with that.
Yes, I actually did this thing. Dave Phillips has a precision overdrive I did for him that he has affectionately labeled it as clap tone.
Nice. That's a cool name.
So it has that pedal sounds like Cream. It really does. Sounds like a lot of those things, those sounds that were coming out of Marshalls giving it up and amps just giving it up, and that pedal sounds great. So I took that pedal. I had to lift some of the, like half the component out of the circuit to get a good reading on it, and found out what every cap did, every value was for the cap, what they actually read on a meter, every resistor, what it read on a meter, every potentiometer, how it read on the meter. Mm-hmm. And I think it was 30, 35, 50 pedals, precision overdrives, which have the screamer bass topology to it,
Yeah.
And I went in trying to create, and I kept that pedal until I got this whole experiment done. And again, every resistor was the same, every capacitor was the same value, pots and so forth. I got all of them done. They were all different. Some had a little more bass, some had a little more mid-range, some had a little more brightness. And for different players, that would absolutely be their thing. It's a little bright for me.
Right.
Yeah, for you, it may be perfect depending on what amp you're running it through or what your application is. Mm-hmm. But that really taught me, and I did another experiment years before that with exotic AC booster pedals where I put 10 or 12 of them together. And all of those sounded a little different, and again, put all the pots values at noon. What does that mean? Well, the pot values are all, the way the pots were made are all different. So noon on one may be 1 o'clock on the other.
Yep.
So as you're dialing them in, there's this dance of, okay, where does the gain value need to be? Mm-hmm. Does it need to be 2 o'clock on this one where it was 12 o'clock on that one?
Totally.
So as you do those taste tests and so forth, you absolutely find that to really, and this is going to really piss off retailers as far as, especially smaller retailers. I always tell guys, go in and find 5 or 6 and sit there and listen to them. Or maybe off of Reverb, buy 10 of them and then sit down and figure out which one works for you and then launch the others.
Yeah.
Because they're all a little different. And it's amps the same way. Guitars the same way.
Totally.
You got to find the one that, and on guitars it could be just a little bit of a setup variation would have made it a world of difference.
Totally. Or sometimes it's even a string change. Like I'll switch alloy changes for guitar. Like I may go to half wounds, or I may just do pure nickel, or I maybe do a nickel, right? And some, especially with vintage guitars, I've noticed that there's a big difference. And when I settle on that string that I think inspires me, because we're all after that, right? There's no right or wrong.
Right.
There's no objective criteria that we can check off.
How do you measure mojo?
Yeah,
How do you measure magic?
You can't.
But
you know it when you experience it.
Right.
And I think that's what we're after. Whatever gives the player that. So whenever I find a string combination and I start with that and work my way through the signal chain, I'm like, that's that guitar for me. I want to have those strings on it because consistently I get inspired.
Right.
I get inspired when I put it in my hands, as opposed to like, well, this is the coolest string. It's balanced tension NYXL or whatever, some new, or it's blue. Remember when Dean Markley did the blue strings?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's seared into my brain. I can't get it out.
The rainbow ones from DR.
Right. Oh, even better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you're like, okay, and of course they sound like they look, but basically you waste a lot of time going, well, is this the magic sauce? Am I missing something? And then you put them on, you're like, no, okay, let me go back to whatever, and it's kind of cool because we settle on what we like, and it's all about the inspiration.
Yeah.
And pedals, I think, are that thing that everybody's always looking for, new inspiration.
Right.
And amps and all of the thing. I think that's what's fueling this whole industry. In a lot of ways.
And I think effect pedals in general, or just really effects, but effect pedals really can emphasize your inspiration, if that makes a lot of sense. It's like, it's a very big part. I get inspired with a new pedal. I'm playing different. Same. I'm listening different. I'm trying new things. Every time, and it's every pedal, so everyone that comes through. So it's cool to think about it that way, where they're all individual units with this little magic that you can't really measure or control, for that matter.
Yeah. So when we look at tolerances, because we get into it, because I guess you've probably reached that bell curve, like in any of your production runs that you've done. If you do 30 pedals,
right?
There's probably a bell curve in there, where you're like, the majority of the pedals are fitting well within this. That's the tone. Do you ever thin the herd out from the outliers, or just push them back on the shelves a little bit and go, these didn't make whatever it is that you were looking for?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had just the precision overdrive pedal. I've had a few that were just too bright or just too bassy. It was like putting a blanket over, the amplifier. Mm-hmm. And with those, I, jerked the circuit board out and started over,
Right.
Didn't have to lose the enclosure, which is expensive, and some of the other parts, but the circuit board itself, tossed it, put another circuit board in, and it fell back into line with what our specs are for it, and so forth. Mm-hmm. You brought up an interesting point too that I want to, circle back around. Is we've had guys come to us, and on their pedal board, the delay was the first thing in the chain.
First thing.
Yeah, I'm paraphrasing to a little, but their signal chain was very different from what you would normally think would work.
Yeah.
Because you put an overdrive after a delay, and you're going to exaggerate the delay because of the gain that's happening after the delay. Mm-hmm. So we would always put delays and tremolos and reverbs and stuff at the end of the chain, and probably univibes, octafuzzes at the very beginning, then compressors, and then go through overdrives and the preamp stuff. Mm-hmm. Put a volume pedal in there somewhere. But I think Barry's line was always, a man with experience is never at the mercy of a man with an opinion. If it works for you, then don't let us tell you any different. Because and we've actually kind of scratched our heads a few times over the years on, well, that's not what's typical that we would do. That's not the way I would run my board. But this guy's playing 220 dates a year,
He's on the Billboard charts.
He's playing a lot more than I am. So my opinion means nothing.
Right.
But it's that's the interesting thing of finding something. We've had guys teach us a ton. We have guys that are amazing players, outstanding players, know absolutely nothing about their gear. Mm-hmm. I want you to do the board, you do your thing. We get that a lot. And of course we've done so many boards now, and I mean, I don't know how many solder joints Eric has done to this point, but it's got to be getting close to 1 million solder joints. He's done so many. But every now and then, we'll learn something from somebody that may have what we consider very little experience. They used to have these shows in town, which would be at the Preston Hotel, right, where every floor of the hotel was taken up by an amp maker, guitar maker, whatever.
Yeah, I miss those days.
I do too.
Like a mini NAMM show.
It was,
Remember
the amp shows?
Yeah. And then, a couple of times they had Jack Pearson come and play a show, and then, and that's an experience all to its own.
Yeah, it is.
And, but when we were there, we had just done the Winford Drive. And Chris Miller is a friend of ours. He's been Keith's tech for years and years, and is a great tech, can do everything that we would do for Keith, and he's a great tech. And so we told him, as we would do things for them here and there, we'd tell, okay, if there's anything that Keith ever needs, don't hesitate to ask. And he came in one day with a big big box rat pedal.
Okay.
And Chris said, well, this is, an idea would be for this to work with more guitars. This only works with certain things at its best. So how can we do different things? So we took that idea, and then we started working on it, basically a rat topology, and we found that once you started really getting the gain up, that it would, for lack of a better way to phrase that, would kind of fart out. The gain would get loose and get tubby and so forth, and it would not as pleasing. So we did this one, what we called it's a presence control. That's really the glass of the notes. You've got a tone control that can do bright and dark, that can roll off high end. Mm-hmm. But this presence knob can really clean it up on the Winford when you get the gain up. And then we also put in a mid-range control that added mids, but not only mid frequency but mid gain as well. Not a ton of gain, but there's gains in the mids that's being added as you turn that up. So that cured a lot of ills. And still to today, if I have to take one overdrive pedal if I had to just take one of what we do to a gig, it would probably be the Winford Drive, because I would typically keep the gain below 10 o'clock or somewhere in that area. But it can get fuzzy, it can get gainy, it can get Lukather-ish kind of gain, and so forth. But that one really cleans up when you roll down the volume of the guitar. Mm-hmm. Once we got the pedal done, it took us about a year or so to really get it right. Jed Hughes was really influential in coming in and listening, and he used it for a while and so forth, and he lent his ears to. And we go, when Jed says it's done, then it's done. We had all these prototypes and so forth. So that was an interesting experience to go through that process from, hey, again, we're looking for the solution, right? This is the problem. What can we do to solve the problem?
Yeah. When you're kind of doing that and you're working with, because I've got some ideas, but when you're, of course you do. But if you think about it, when you're working with someone, especially an artist that is as well known as Keith Urban is, and they come in with just sort of a soft ask, like, hey, can you make this a little more? What was the reaction when you were able to sort of get it back to them and go, try this and see what happens?
Well, typically, I don't know that we ever, at least it wasn't for me. Again, I was in and out of Nashville. I don't know that I ever actually was part of a session where Keith was sitting there playing it. We'd go hand it off to Chris, and Chris would make sure that it got to Keith. And, it needs more of this. And then the one thing that we had to do is there's one particular op amp that is used in that particular pedal that you can't find, the original rat pedals that you can't find anymore. Or if you do, they're black market. They may be good. They may not be. They could be counterfeits. So we said we have to find a part that, if the apocalypse happened and there's only roaches and this component, left on Earth, that's the component that we're looking for. That one that will be there forever. Yeah. And so there was a challenge around getting that to work, because we had to change a bunch of parts and re-EQ it and so forth to get that particular component to work in the pedal. That's one of the things that took the longest in getting that to be ironed out. But trying to go to market with the vintage obsolete part would not have made sense at all in that. And that's, nowadays everything is surface mount. It's hard to find the older components that people have used for years in doing things. So
that's funny because my next question was going to be about trends.
Yep.
And obviously there's we kind of mentioned earlier, there's a lot of trends in pedals, right?
Right.
And as a business like yours, you're looking at what's next, what's forward thinking, what is the next pedal that we're going to do. Is there anything that you can share with us that you guys are working on right now that maybe trying to spot a trend, trying to see what maybe the next thing is?
I think that our workload in again, I go back to since 2020, going through the changes that we all did as a country, different businesses and stuff, in dealing with the pandemic. I think that our focus on the backside of that has been mostly on getting the rigs done and keeping people working and so forth. Mm-hmm. I think that this year, the first 3 months of this year, I think it's the busiest we've ever been.
It's fantastic.
I really do think it's the busiest we've ever been. I mean, I would have loved for Barry to have been here today as part of this interview.
We'll get him on. We'll get him on.
And it's just, no, we have deadline commitments that if I even take the afternoon off to go do this, it's that it's going to potentially impede one of those deadline commitments and so forth. So we have been really busy with that. We do have several pedals in the can right now, as they would say in the recording industry. We have several things in the can that we want to do the releases correct and so forth. And again, right now we're busy. There's one particular thing that we want to release in the near future, a couple of things actually, but we want to be able to have the production to be able to feel the need that's there and so forth, but do some of the marketing stuff the right way. So that's kind of, there's a few overdrive, because we've focused mostly on gains, and we do a compressor called the Fermata compressor. A lot of guys that hate compression, what they don't like is that the top end, the high E, the B, the G will be fine, but once we get to the A and the E, it just gets too flubby. We created this particular pedal where there's one knob that actually controls how the bass is sensed in the pedal. I know I'm probably not. Barry's going to roll his eyes when he sees this, but it allows you to kind of set how when you start playing the low strings, how's the pedal going to see that?
So you can do almost a harmonic tilt, as if it's almost like a side chain with a low pass filter or some derivation of something like that. So it doesn't overexcite the compression circuit. You can tailor it.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is to see a player that uses compression and know that compression start on the low E, like maybe on with an open low E, mm-hmm. and go all the way down to the 12th fret high E. And the compression is changing with each string and so forth to where it's, I don't know whether the phrase be more linear or not in getting to that. But that's kind of again, it's a solution to a problem that certain guys don't. There's a few compressors out there that are really good and so forth, but to get it to where it balances with the way that the low end excites the compressor and so forth, that was a challenge to get done. And again, I don't know that we've sold a ton of those, but again, the marketing of that has never been what it should have been. We'll release it with the new lemony smell and kind of give it another to go.
Right.
But that's a good device.
Greg, you are such a music lover like all of us. Let's talk about some of your favorite moments, defining moments for you. Like, what's your favorite album? Who's your favorite guitar player? Why? What's your favorite guitar tone? Do you have like a specific combination, guitar into certain amps, that kind of stuff? Is there What do you look for when you go to a club and you hear somebody with great tone? What are they usually playing?
I want you to answer those in order.
Okay.
And, one at a time.
Where's the script?
Right, sorry.
No, so the first question was about records or about music.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in my music collection, I have way too much guitar music. That's a good and a bad because that's what I've always gravitated to. And we were talking a little bit at lunch, and like from an early point, like the first few guitar players. I mean, the reason I really got into playing guitar, the impetus for me getting into it, and I didn't start playing until, again, I was late. It was like 19. And until I learned music theory, I couldn't really learn by ear. When I learned what the math was, then I could put together what 1-4-5 was. And once I found the center of the key, I could figure out from that point. But again, my ear, for whatever reason, my brain didn't comprehend learning by ear like most people do, like most guitar players do, at least the really great ones and so forth. I had friends turn me on to Hendrix, and and I kind of worked backwards. Hendrix, Beatles, back from there. So some of those early rock records, I gravitated towards the blues guys for whatever reason. It was later that I really got into Muddy Waters and Freddie King and Albert King and I gravitated early on to. Clapton was one of the first ones because he was the one that was out there putting out records. Like Slow Hand was a big thing for me. Yeah. Peter Green, some of the stuff that he did. And in fact, a little story that Kenny Cordray told me years ago, someone that we both knew from Texas Guitar, is he told a story about him and Billy Gibbons being friends, and as Billy toured, and he went to the UK at some point and spent a number of days with Peter Green, getting from the story that Kenny was telling me. So he spent a good amount of time with Peter Green while he was in the UK, and he said I came back, and one weekend we were on a double bill. There our different bands were, and he goes, when I heard somebody playing, as I'm loading in my gear, as I was hearing somebody play from the stage, he goes, well, I thought Gibbons and those guys were opening for us tonight. He goes, they are. He goes, well, who's that on stage? And he goes, it's Billy. And he went out in front and looked, and he says, it was a great guitar player that just had more, in a short period of time, morphed into this just amazing. He said the way that Kenny put it to me, he was Billy Gibbons. That was the first time he had really heard what he could do, and so forth.
I think to that point, I think there are some underrated guitar players, and two that always come to mind that I don't think get a lot of, especially blues artists. Like Billy Gibbons is probably in the top 3 for me as most underrated. We all love his playing, but like if you think about what he does, he's got this beautiful formula that he plays, where he plays the same lick. He'll make a statement and he'll play it 2 to 3 times, and then he moves on. And he's got this cool way of just guiding you through a thematically unified solo, instead of something like, not that I'm picking on this because I love his playing, and that's Guthrie Govan, where he can play 128th notes, and it just like blah, it all comes out at once, and it's like, okay, but he also has motivic development too. But Billy just keeps everything in the pocket. It grooves so hard, and right out of the same ballpark is Jimmy Vaughn, the straight ahead blues. Those early Fabulous Thunderbirds records that he was playing at, and even to this day, I mean, even his latest album that he came out with, is fantastic. He is such an amazing guitar player. It's so unique in his approach.
Right.
Who would you think you'd add to that list, or is there anybody that you go, he's always been one of my favorites, and not at the top of any guitar poll necessarily, but just such a great player?
Can I say you?
Bryan,
Okay,
Bryan's
there we go.
Wow, man. That
Bryan's
is
an underrated guitar.
I'm going to have to leave.
I think, I don't think he's underrated. I don't know that when I talk to people about like Jack Pearson, like
Yes.
everyone in this town absolutely knows who he is.
Yep.
And, as well as, there are a group of people that absolutely knows. I don't know that I saw him at the Station Inn one night, and Steve Warner sat in with him for a few songs, and he did an acoustic set first. And the thing that got me is like when he was doing the old blues stuff, even the Clams that were off of those records. I mean, he got everything perfect. And the fact that, that with very little effect wise or very little instrument wise, it wasn't, he did so much and said so much. And it just, for him, it's like drinking water. It looks like it's just so effortless when you watch him do that. Every time I go and watch him play, I go home and go, I have a lot of very expensive firewood, So he's amazing.
I agree with you 100%.
And I've got a couple of his records, and I love those as well. Mm-hmm. So being at XTS, we are brick and mortar. The people that walk through the door, we're very fortunate to get a chance to work with and become friends. It's almost like everybody that we do business with, it's part of a family. I don't look at anybody as necessarily a customer or whatever. You're just becoming part of the family and so forth. And I mean, I don't know whether you get that vibe or not, but it's like I've had people come in for the first time and walk out going, wow, I would have come in 10 years ago had I known. And the fact that we work with some of the more higher profile people, some guys go, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Well, we get to see so many great players. And every now and then I have to ask, am I going to have to pay a cover charge? And a guy that we've done a lot of work with over the last few years, especially the last 3-4 years, has been Andy Wood.
Yeah, he's a great player.
And as technical as he is, the one thing that always stands out to me is his musicality, his attention to detail. But when he comes in and he's wanting to change his board, and I think I want to go to this, the new Fractal effects pedal, the one that just does reverbs, delays, and all of that. He brought that to us. But he already knows how to program it. He already knows what he wants out of it. He already knows. And some people want to come in and be completely hands-off. Here, you guys do it. Program a few sounds or show me how to do that. But he comes in with a fully formulated idea of how this is going to be. And that, again, all the spectrums of somebody coming in saying, okay, here's 3 songs. I want to get those sounds.
Yeah.
That's very liberating for us too. It lets us be creative. But a client that comes in knowing the gear, like for me, I know gear, but I'm a god awful player. I play what I play. I use the old Gibbons line. I know about 3 chords. But for him to be as great a player he is and to be so well versed in all of the gear and know where he wants to go, knows which paint he needs for the canvas and so forth. That's pretty impressive.
It's talking about underrated guitarists, and I really appreciate the sentiment of like just having this family network of musicians that come in, and a lot of them are underrated when you think about it. We live in such a very unique guitar town.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no place that I have ever been, and I've gone shopping for guitars all corners of the world at this point, and here there's so many stores, there's so many places to go and interact and have and be able to meet all these players, and then you wind up hearing just some of the most unbelievable styles of playing and the diversity. So I'd say the most underrated guitar player is the Nashville community, because that is like, I feel like there are so many world-class musicians here that nobody knows their name, and they all converge in this one place, and it's kind of a beautiful thing. I mean, we go to Carter's, man, and you just listen, and you're like wow, some of these players are just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then I'll be specific on one.
Okay.
Alex McMurray from the Tin Men in New Orleans.
Okay.
He is a phenomenal guitar player, and I don't think he gets his due. He plays a lot. He plays out. He plays Jazz Fest every year, and they do a bunch of gigs. But I think Alex, he needs his flowers, man.
Right on.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I need to check him out.
Yeah, he's cool.
I'll add one to my list that I got turned on to this player through Barry and Eric because they were already familiar. And I mean, it's not like he's he's well known, very well known in certain circles. But Ian Thornley with Big Wreck.
Yeah.
I mean, when somebody asked me, you know, an amazing vocal,
Totally.
amazing songwriting. The lyrics to certain songs the writing is great.
That's a good one. That's a good one, Greg. He is
playing
underrated.
slide guitar. I mean, you know, we always think of Sonny Landreth and certain guys that are really great slide players. Ian Thornley's killer.
It's a great concert, too.
Yeah,
Man.
And his regular soloing, you know, takes me back to Austin. Some of the players around Austin that just have complete command of the instrument.
You know, two people just came across my radar too, just thinking about it, that I would definitely sort of fill out my top, 10 list with. One would be Dan Huff.
Yep.
Because no one really gives Dan the credit that is
amazing.
due. Such a complete musician. But even higher on my, maybe number one would be Robert Cray. No one talks about Robert Cray anymore. Fantastic singer, great player, and just such a unique style when you think about how he attacks the instrument. Because it's percussive. It's that Albert Collins on a Strat kind of a thing.
Yep.
But man, you listen to I just was on YouTube maybe a week ago and I was watching him play from 2024 and then going back to Strong Persuader days from the late 80s and just seeing the evolution. But he comes up with some of the coolest blues licks, I would say, on the same level of complexity, but he'll do it on a single string, as a Robin Ford might do, a diminished over the alter dominant kind of thing.
Right.
He kind of just plays these killer bendy. It's so Robert Cray. I just adore that guy. I think he's probably my number one most underrated guitar player these days, even though he's been a guitar hero forever. But
absolutely.
But you don't hear him. He's never on the magazines. He's never really talked about that much. His singing is incredible.
Eric Gales.
Well,
That's another guy that I think is super underrated that should be in those conversations.
And especially his journey.
Unbelievable.
That he's been through. Yeah. That's
watching him play is so crazy. I've never seen somebody play like him. Maybe Vernon Reed.
Ooh, Vernon.
Yeah. But
every time I go down this rabbit trail, it's like I think back to a lot of the Texas guys that I used to see at Rockefeller's in Houston or the Satellite Lounge that was right next to Rockefeller's. But, and guys like David Grissom have really, gotten their dues and he's one of my favorite players. Mm-hmm. But guys like, David Holtz, another one that was in that same Storyville band, mm-hmm. Doyle Bramhall, DB2, amazing. Yeah. And great vocal, great guitar player. Charlie Sexton, amazing producer as well.
Charlie's great.
For me, after getting in, you had asked me earlier, after getting in, my taste really gravitated to studio guys. To the Larry Carltons, Lee Ritenour, mm-hmm. and it was there was a guitar instructor in Texas that I went in there in Houston. I went and did one lesson with the guy, and at the time I was extremely enamored, as I still am, with Steve Lukather and his playing and his ability and his tones and so forth. Yeah. And I walked away that day. He says, "Okay, if you like that, you need to go Larry Carlton, Robin Ford, which took me down all of the studio players. So being in this town and being able to, we've done a board for Dan Huff and Tom Bukovac and Guthrie Trapp and just going. There's the whole list. Derek Wells and all of the guys at Ilya that are there. And I know that I'm leaving out a ton, 90% of
Jerry
them.
McPherson.
Jerry, just incredible players.
Yeah. These are the A-list guys in Nashville, folks that get 90% of the work for the commercial country and rock Americana stuff. The big artists come to town. These guys are on the Rolodex, the quick dial, speed dial.
And Mike Landau is one that a lot of guys, it's like he's always been one of my favorite players because and he doesn't stay. His playing continues to progress and morph into different things. When I first started seeing him, it was this. It was the Burning Water, Raging Honkies era, where it was. You could tell the guy got things from Cobain, even as far as tonality and attitude and so forth. But he got a lot from Hendrix and Stevie Ray and stuff like that.
You remember that record that they did? And I don't know if you heard this, Renegade Nation, where Robin and Landau got together. Oh, dude, there's a cool track on there for those who might be interested in it called "What's Up," and Landau's actually singing on it.
Right.
And he sounds like Mark Knopfler. He's got this like really cool, quick like a bullet, but all toned down, and it's just groovy as hell. And Robin's like skanking the rhythm part, and Landau's just doing all the crazy stuff. It's cool. I mean, as you would expect it to be, but it's pretty awesome.
I tell you, seeing Mike play live at the Baked Potato in L.A., that's eye-opening, But seeing David Grissom at the Saxon Pub,
sure.
in Austin is also just devastatingly not only musical but entertaining, and those guys are too. I love their music quite a bit. Mike has just his touch. It's like, again, it goes back to the hands. Yeah. So anyway,
it's funny with all of these players. You can every single one that we've talked about, you can immediately associate a guitar with them that that they play. Isn't that a cool thing? It's like you think of any particular one of those guys, and you're like, that's what they play.
Yeah,
and that's a cool thing.
Yeah. Oh, and on that point, I was about to ask, what's your favorite guitar?
There you go.
Desert Island guitar. Like, you got to pick one.
And it doesn't have to be one that you own. Let's give them that run. It could be any guitar.
Okay.
I mean, picking one guitar, it would definitely be, it would be a Strat. I mean, I have a James Tyler Burning Water Strat that I got from Jim years ago. That is really a killer guitar, but a Strat would probably be, the one that I would gravitate to, like playing your Strat earlier. That the neck, the feel, it's where I feel at home.
Yeah.
What's yours?
Mine?
Yeah.
Telecaster.
Telecaster.
Yeah, I'm a Tele guy. I just love the utilitarian nature of it. I'm still in awe of Leo Fender batting 1,000 on pretty much for the first decade that he was in business.
Yeah.
From the lap steels to the tweed amps to the precision bass to the Telecaster and then the Stratocaster. They're like, who does this? It's a wonder. It's like, your baseball guy. What's his name again? Sorry.
Shohei Ohtani.
There you go. I know I apologize, baseball fans. It's not my jam. But, I mean, he's like that to me.
Yeah.
Like, no one does that without failing.
No.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Crazy.
And to that, the Telecaster. Maybe if you can't do it on a Telecaster, it doesn't need to be done. I've heard guys say that. Because there's so many tones. I know I was even watching a video recently where Vince was talking about his 53 Telecaster and just talking about how he uses the tone knob to shape
Yep.
You know, you can knock the top end down a hair, and that's the one thing which we were talking at lunch. It's like probably one of the greatest effects that you can use is the volume knob on the guitar.
Yes.
And dealing with that and tone knobs, like Eric Johnson putting the bridge pickup on one of the tone knobs. And a lot of guys do that. I do that.
I do too.
Okay. You can get so much out of that bridge pickup that you couldn't get without that being on there.
Yeah. Guys, so for those, we got to explain it because we're going into nerd land. But for those of you who are along for the ride, if you have a traditionally wired Stratocaster, you can flip the wiring on it because the Strat has one master volume and two tone knobs. And the way that the Strat was originally designed, it had three-way pickup selector switch. So you had a neck and a middle and the bridge. The five-way didn't come out until almost 20 years later.
Right.
But what Eric did is he took the lowest, the one that was a tone knob. He took the one that was closest to the jack, the input jack, and made that a dedicated tone knob for the bridge pickup, which is great because the Strats have a tendency to sound a little shrill based on the angle of where they are in relationship to the bridge, even though it's basically the same on a Telecaster, but the Telecaster had that bridge plate that everything got mounted on, and it took some of that edge off. The Strat didn't have that; it had a different bridge system, so you could pull off some of the top end. There's another one that I want to tell you about too that I did on one of mine, on one of my Strats, and it is, I can't remember. It's called the Fez Park mod. Have you seen this?
No.
Okay, check this out. So 5-way switch if you want.
Okay.
What you do is you rewire it to where if it's in position 1, meaning neck position selector switch.
Okay.
The last knob now, instead of the EJ knob, right?
Right.
That one that's closest to the input jack, that now becomes a blend switch, rotary, for the neck and the bridge pickup, with the emphasis slightly tilted towards the neck if it's in neck position. If you go to bridge position, it tilts it a little bit more. So basically what you can get is this beautiful Strat scoop.
Right.
That is, and then the other positions will still work. It's just blending in almost. You could have all three pickups working together. So you could get position 2, like a good Knopfler out of phase kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You could get that, but then you can blend in a little bit more top by putting your bridge pickup in there, and it scoops it out even more. I've seen
that mod done with a push-pull pot.
Yes,
well.
yes. You can. But this was cool because it was traditional.
Yeah.
You didn't have to add a new, anything. It was just like rewire.
Yeah.
Okay, let me. Your favorite guitar, Desert Island Guitar.
Desert Island Guitar.
Wait, can I guess?
Yeah, you can guess.
335. Walnut.
I do love that guitar.
Okay, no.
Well, my first question is as a qualifier is like, so can I make my own strings on this island? Like, is there a certain, like, am I going nylon? Am I going gut?
Wow. Okay, you guys.
Because I need to know if I'm going to be able to change my strings, because that'll considerably change what kind of guitar it's going to be.
Okay, well, we both picked electric, so let's.
I was going to say it's probably like a D28 or a D35, something like that.
For an acoustic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My Desert Island guitar would probably be an acoustic guitar.
It would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Right on.
I'm sure there's power everywhere. We can take a deluxe reverb
That's right.
and a Strat or a Tele.
We're sitting out on the
beach. How y'all gonna hear it?
Clink, clink, clink. He's getting all the chicks on the island because they can hear what he's playing. We're like, did you hear that ultradominant?
That's funny. One of the things I was going to say, and you're talking about, and one of the things I admired about James Tyler and those that worked with him and so forth is some of the switching things that he used. So like, one of the options was to have all three pickups on at the same time. And that was used a lot on records that we know, pop records and stuff that we know.
Yeah. And then you had that boost. You could push the boost in, and you can do the split. If you had a humbucker, he'd add that in. He got so fancy with that.
Yeah. And it worked, and some of the pickups that he used were the DiMarzio, not the Seymour Duncans, that had the red and the covers over them that were, some of them were fairly hot, but the way that things were being split. I know Rich Rankin is going to go, no, you're completely wrong about that. But Rich, Jim passed not long ago, and Rich Rankin has kind of taken over the moving the company forward and so forth. And I think they've done a new guitar for Dan recently.
Wow.
So I think they presented him with a guitar probably a year or so ago.
Oh, that's great.
But being able to get different sounds out of like, again, even going back to your Telecaster, being able to just use a volume knob, your tone knobs, your switch, it can do a ton.
It can. It's such a palette of tone, of timbral change.
I remember seeing a custom shop, a Nash, I believe, when he used to work at the custom shop. Is that his name?
I don't know if Nash worked at the custom shop. I don't know.
Anyway, there was a guitar that I saw.
Bill Nash.
Yeah, I thought so. Maybe not. Anyway, it was a Telecaster, but it had a pickup under the pick guard and a 5-way selector switch. Wow. It was a custom shop, so it was like it was under the pick guard, so you couldn't see it, and it was one of the coolest Teles I've ever played in my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm trying to think about.
We sold it at the Guitar Center in Nashville, and it was butterscotch. It looked like an old,
like a blackguard,
typical Telecaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
There had been routed out and 3 pickups. It's kind of cool.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder how he wired that. Anyway, that's amazing.
I don't remember.
There's always these cool.
It's pricey. It's a very expensive guitar.
Was it?
It was like $15,000 or something.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay. Man.
The more you spend, the better you sound.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
And
right.
the better your guitar player you are, the more notes you play.
It's like you can't dress trashy until you spend a lot of money. Yeah.
What else are we going to cover?
Okay, let's think about this.
Records.
Oh, yeah, let's
Oh, God.
Okay.
We'll start on that end this time.
Oh, no. You can't do that to me. What, favorite records? Favorite rock records or
Just
guitar
pick
performances?
what would.
What would come in your underneath your arm if you were going to a desert island party?
You're really on this desert island today,
I
huh?
don't know. That's just a frame.
So
of
they
reference.
got batteries for the record player.
Let's see. All right.
Are we having rum later?
Yeah, right. Okay, you're just gonna go to a party. You're gonna go over to
Okay.
a buddy that you just met. You vibe musically or whatever, and you want to go. Hey, I'm gonna bring over maybe 5 records that you'd be like, yes, real quick.
Okay.
What would it be?
That's tough. It's like, well, have you heard Dark Side of the Moon before? Like.
Okay, let's assume you don't know. Let's assume you don't know.
Okay.
So just to be on the safe side and it's not your final list. It's
Sure,
just
sure.
like for that night you're gonna bring those 5 records. What would it be?
Okay. I've been listening to this a lot lately. Arcade Fire's Neon Bible.
Okay.
Amazing records, almost like a darkest Springsteen record. Pretty cool.
Nice.
Let's see. Probably want to bring something dancey.
Okay.
So like a Mike Snow record, Swedish synth pop, kind of fun, bouncy stuff.
Good.
Let's see. Maybe if they're into art rock, maybe I could suppose they're into art rock. I could bring like a Deer Hunter record or something like that.
Okay, yeah, you turned me on to those guys
Yeah,
a couple weeks ago. That's a really cool band.
Um,
Deer as in DEAR.
DEAR, like Deer Hunter.
Yeah.
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 Let's see. That's tough.
2 more.
2 more. Probably one of the Ghost records.
Okay.
It's a lot of fun. It's like a Def Leppard-y kind of jam.
Okay.
And maybe something classic like a Zeppelin 2 or something like that.
Okay. I love that.
Well, okay. I took too much time with those.
No,
Right,
dude,
go.
that's a good 5. Okay, for me, Spirit of Eden Talk.
Oh, God, I'm going to kill you for that one, man. I love that record now. I'd never heard this record before. He turned me on. I just can't stop listening to it. Unbelievable.
It's amazing. Yeah. I think it's as important as Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah,
So Spirit of Eden Talk. I'm going to bring over Skylarking from XTC. I'll bring over Nevermind the Bollocks from the Sex Pistols. I will bring over, probably as a weird one, except Balls to the Wall, just because I want to hear some big tone. And maybe if I'm just going to follow it up with like kind of a funk kind of a thing or whatever, I would hit Marvin Gaye, What's Going On.
The number 1 record of all time.
Yeah, on our past list episode.
Yeah.
No, but just because to bring it.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah,
Or
it's
James,
great.
or
I mean,
yeah,
those are great.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just so predictable.
Well, those are Bryan's top
I'm
four.
good.
They are.
At
They,
least.
they are. But yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I was thinking. Like you know,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've had these. What would be some of yours?
I can't be that creative. I'm going to be a little more popular oriented. Dogman from King's X is one of them.
Yeah.
That's a great record.
Asia from Steely Dan.
Okay.
That's kind of that, man. That for whatever reason, like all of the writing, lyrics, music, whatever, that's always been good.
Yeah.
There's a couple of Los Lobos records that are just I forget the name. I forget the name of the record, but it was anything by Los Lobos. I would probably pick one of their records. That's I'd go in with probably Are You Experienced?
Ooh, yeah.
That would be one, and there's a kind of as an off the beaten path thing. Well, I'll just say I was listening to Porcupine Tree this morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's Dead Wing.
Dead Wing's great.
Yep.
Yeah. That's how I found the Deer Hunter, by the way. Was a Porcupine Tree show. They were the opening act. Yeah.
Oh, right on.
And
That's a good pair.
Yeah. Oh,
That's a
totally.
really good pair.
and what is the if I got a chance to bring a six, it would probably be Albatross by Big Wreck.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a good record, but
Hell yeah.
all of that.
Man,
And like
see, that's
I
the
go to
thing.
both your parties.
I would go to all these parties. I'd be like, yes, we're gonna have some good. This is our the Nashville Tone Club. This will be our.
We need to have a
thing.
tone party. I like that idea.
I do too. I think that's a really good idea. Let me ask this then. In the last couple of years, let's say, what's been an album that you've heard? It doesn't matter whether it's old or new, but something that was relatively new to you that you would go, that's amazing. And you can't say talk.
I mean, I already answered the question.
You did, damn it. All right,
It's a great question, but go to you.
I withdraw. For me, the one that stood out most recently, I say most recently in the last several years, but the one that was like, this is an amazing era. Two, Silk Sonic. Right when that record came out, I was like, oh, this is so much fun.
It's so good.
So much fun. So two, Dr. John, Lockdown,
Okay.
which Dan Arbach produced,
Whoa.
and so good. It's one of
Can't
my
wait to
favorite.
see the Black Keys. I'm going to see them in like a couple weeks at Jazz Fest.
Right on.
Be fun.
Yeah.
Michael Kiwanuka. It's got this the way that it was recorded has this very smoky. It's almost like you can feel that you're in the room. It's almost like you can smell the smoke in the room. Almost like an old, sounds like an old Van Morrison song. And the other one is actually a buddy of mine here locally. His name is John Radabaugh. Where We Go From Here is the name of that record. Okay. And it's like, for me, at times, I again, Asia is a record that I listen to. John Harrington did a solo record that I really like a lot. And if I'm just chilling out, maybe having a scotch or something, I'll put that on. Some of the old Jeff Beck records, Wired, Blow by Blow. Yeah. I love that. And I think John's record for me kind of fits in there with all of those records with equal weight to me. Now, I know the guy, he's been a friend for a long time, but I like not only his guitar playing, but the compositions and so forth. So I think that record, and again, a local guy. He's not 21. You know, he's taken this on and done several records and has, really forwarded really started playing a lot. The last record, he had a few people like Bukovac show up and play on the record and so forth, and had,
So he got blessed. It was blessed.
and that its Intuition is the second record, and it's a really good record too.
I'll definitely check that out. Let me ask this, just because that you saying that age made me think of it. On the people that are coming into XTS right now,
right?
Are you seeing a young bumper crop of new guitar players, or folks that are coming in with like a need for either buy new pedals or rigs needing to be built. Like, are you seeing that happen, or does it feel like it's kind of a certain demographic that's a little more easier to peg?
We do have, I think, more young people coming in the last couple of years than we've seen in the past. I would think that like an average age of the guys that are probably in are mid-30s into the 50s and 60s and so forth. There is a lot of that as well. Like, we're doing rigs for different instruments. Like, we did Tim Weisberg, the flute player.
Okay.
We did a flute rig. We've done saxophone rigs. We've done keyboard rigs. We do a lot of bass rigs. We do guys that are utility guys that are doing mandolin, violin, acoustic guitar, steel guitar, that are covering the instruments that aren't being covered otherwise. Those always pose, you have to approach a little bit differently. The utilities guys' rigs are probably some of the more complex at times.
Yeah, I'd imagine. So DI this to, whatever the routing is.
Yeah, because they interface with so many sections of the stage and so many departments. So.
Yeah, the I/O matrix has got to be pretty involved. Do you get a lot of, you guys built my my synth pedal board, which is a stereo pedal board that I run synths that don't have any effects through. I run it through those guys. But I also use that as outboard effects, as if it was just a processor. Like, I had a 2290, or a AMS RMX 16 or some classic piece of gear that I'm like, wow, I love that. I'm using it to process signal through too. Do you get a little bit of that too?
I can't speak to that as well as Barry could speak to that. We do have people that put certain things on their board for either their home studio or they want to use for processing outside of the guitar world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't think that's a common thing, but we do have certain people that need to use the rig for multi-purposes, and some of it's running vocals through it, some of it's running other instruments through it. I mean, one of the rigs that we did, kind of speaking, it's kind of in the same ballpark, but we did a rig for Billy Strings that was right before they had to play Bonnaroo. I think it was the week before, or a week and a half before. We had to get a rig ready for him in like a couple of days. And they brought us a rig that was partially wired and everything was good with the work that had already been done. And we had to figure out how to finish it up and make it all seamless with working with their stage setup and so forth. And it was interesting, some of the pieces that were there because of the way his acoustics are set up with pickups and doing other things with that. So I thought that was a fairly interesting rig. And we've done larger rigs. I think we talked about the band Goose. We did, a fairly involved setup for the guitar player for that band. Helping people sound better, get the most out of their gear is really where we focus. So whether it's a weekend warrior, wanting to just have something that's more bulletproof. That's the other thing we didn't talk about is, the Carrie Underwood rigs that we talked about. We did those 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 years ago now, and they're still using those rigs today. I can remember years ago, like hanging out with Dave Friedman and being there while they were getting rigs ready for like Lincoln Park and things like that. It was like almost every year, they were a lot of it I've learned later that they were changing stuff up and so forth. Yeah. But it seemed like years past there was in more rigs being done more frequently. Like we've had this rig for 2 years, we're going to upgrade. Mm-hmm. But it's like some of the rigs that we have out there now, because we have Eric that has done 1 million solder joints practically. It's like we have very little failures.
Yeah.
And we had one of our clients a while back that said that he was talking with other players on the road and said, well, who did your pedal board? And he said, well, XTS. And the guy goes, He said, I wish I could afford that. And he goes, I couldn't afford not to. He said, because every show I was spending 30 minutes getting everything to run correctly. And we may have not, the last thing that we did for him may have been 4 or 5 years ago, and his rig continues to work. So other than, back in the truck over it,
right, they're pretty much bomb-proof, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've had what's the longest that you've?
I think I've had the oldest one is probably 4 years old, and I've played it on lots of sessions, lots of dates,
right?
Lots of gigs, and all the solder joints are great. The attention to detail. It's just you guys are worth every penny that someone's going to spend on getting a proper pedal board put together,
right?
And then what I'm excited about, though, is the pedals that you're coming out with. I'm excited about that, like the new stuff, and the stuff that you guys are gonna, spend some more time on and just market it out more, because I think the world needs to hear. All the pedals between Eric and Barry. They're probably have an encyclopedic knowledge of every pedal, every decade of every pedal, and then for them to be able to go, maybe we want to do our spin on it because we see where other pedals have left off, and you feel that.
We have a few things that we're going to. In fact, we had a meeting on that probably a couple of weeks ago. We have so much work now getting people ready for tour. I mean, the reason Barry couldn't be here today is we have deadline commitments that we have to hit. We're going to hit those deadlines if it hair lips the governor, as they would say. But we do have a few things coming out. But we definitely want to. In the past, we've thrown it up on our Instagram, and then there was a new pedal out. We're going to take a little more time and kind of release the right way. So the one thing that I wanted to also to not sound like the guy that's trying to sell you an extended warranty, but one of the things, especially for local guys, is the support. Once we do a board for you, we always understand the financial commitment you've made to get that board done, and we tell everybody, look, 6 months from now, you're going to think you have a bad cable, and it's going to be smuts in the pedal. We're going to spray out the pedal and get all the contacts clean, and everything's going to be right with the world. But the more we see it, if you want to bring it in, you got a big gig or you're fixing to go on tour or whatever, that's the time to bring it in and let us take a look and just keep track of what's going on. And if we see issues, we always clean up the board. We clean up any contacts that we think need to be sprayed out and so forth. So there's a maintenance thing. And if we get everything done in under 30 minutes, which most of the time we do, it doesn't cost them anything. Yeah. It's just something that we want to do to extend the life of the board and so forth. I don't know. I think we've changed out some stuff for you in the past and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I'll come in and I can't hit that pedal. I'm having to heel punch it instead of toe punch it.
Yep.
Just because it needs to have a little ramp underneath it to jack up the profile of the pedal.
Right.
And you guys cut a wedge and put it on, and it's like, wow, that's perfect.
And in house there in Nashville, we're building our own flat pedal boards. We fabricate all of that. We're doing multi-tier boards. We're doing things on, multi-tiered boards where the top layer is hinged back. On Rich Robinson for the Black Crows, on his board, you hinge back, and there's controllers underneath that are doing a lot of the pedal changes and so forth, because he uses a RGM Mastermind to do a lot of the changes. So he hits one button and changes everything at the same time.
Yeah.
So if you needed a riser, if we send guys out and they go, oh, well, it's hard for me to get to this pedal, we just go back there and cut a riser. We always have stock that we had to cut off of another board, so we always have riser material, so everybody can get to everything. And if they're going to tap dance, they need to be comfortable in the dance.
That's right.
Where can we find you guys online?
It's Xactone, XACTTONE.com.
Okay. socials, etc.?
Yeah, we have Instagram. You know, we post. Barry and Eric post a lot of, like, when we build a board, we may just show it and talk about it.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure talking to you, really getting to know you. I'm looking forward to seeing the shop. I'll have to swing by sometime.
Absolutely. You're welcome anytime.
See you next week, everybody.